What if the most terrifying thing in the galaxy wasn't a monster with claws, but a simple human appetite? On the planet Xylos, a single sentence was uttered that would forever alter the course of interstellar history. It was spoken in a tone of absolute instinctual terror. You can't eat that. Dr. Elias Vance, a human xenobotanist starving and desperate, held a glowing crystalline fungus in his hand. He was about to commit an act more profound and horrifying than simple poisoning. He was about to introduce an entire planet to the single most dangerous concept in the universe, humanity. This is the story of the bite that echoed across the stars. The air on Xylos tasted of ozone and damp soil, a constant reminder to Dr. Elias Vance that he was 47 light-years from anything familiar. For 3 months, the United Terror Expeditionary Force's science vessel, the Magellan, had been a prisoner of this world, its FTL drive a mangled wreck of exotic alloys after an unmapped micrometeorite shower. They were stranded. Worse, they were starving. The planet, while breathtakingly beautiful, was a biological death trap for human physiology. The native fauna was silicone-based, inedible and toxic. The flora, a riot of bioluminescent purples and blues, was laced with complex alkaloids that the ship's bioscanners flagged with skull and crossbones icons. Their hydroponics bay had been crippled in the same accident that stranded them, and the emergency nutrient paste was rationed to a thin, tasteless gruel once per day. Hope like their supplies was dwindling. Elias, chief xenobotanist, felt the failure most acutely. It was his job to find a sustainable food source. Every day he and a Cathar guide would venture into the glowing forests, his scanner working overtime, and every day he would return with the same grim news. The Cathar were the sentient natives of Xylos, a tall, slender species of arthropods that moved with a quiet, deliberate grace. Their bodies were covered in a chitinous exoskeleton, the color of polished obsidian, and they communicated through a series of soft clicks and whistles, which the expedition's universal translators converted into clipped formal English. Their guide, whose translated name was Xylar, was patient and endlessly helpful, but a deep, unshakable sorrow seemed to cling to him. He watched the humans weaken with a sense of pity that bordered on despair. "The anima of the world is not for you," Dr. Vance Xylar would click softly, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the glowing forest floor. "It does not know your chemistry. To consume it is to invite the great stillness." Today was different. Today Elias had found a miracle, or he hoped a miracle. Deep within a cavern system, where waterfalls of phosphorescent algae fell like curtains of light, he found it. A fungus. It grew in crystalline fractal patterns, pulsing with a soft internal white light. It resembled nothing he'd ever seen. His preliminary scans were baffling. The substance, which he dubbed glimmerwood, was carbon-based. Its cellular structure was complex, but it contained amino acids compatible with human biology. More importantly, it was calorie-dense and registered 0 known toxins in the preliminary sweep. It was too good to be true. "Xylar, look at this," Elias said, his voice hoarse from dehydration and excitement. He knelt, holding his scanner over the glowing formation. The composition, it's almost perfect. No alkaloids, no heavy metals. It's clean. I think this might be it." Xylar stopped dead. The usual soft clicking of his mandibles ceased. The air in the cavern grew heavy and still. He took a slow, deliberate step back, his sleek black head tilting. The translator remained silent for a long moment, as if struggling to process the Cathar's agitated emissions. Finally it spoke, the voice, flat and robotic, yet carrying an undeniable undercurrent of panic. "Dr. Vance, step away from the soul route." Soul root, is that what you call it? Elias was too focused on the data streaming across his wrist-mounted screen to pay much heed to the alien's tone. Xyla, this could save us. I need to take a sample. He reached out with a gloved hand, a small geological hammer in the other, intending to chip off a piece. Xyla moved with a speed Elias had never witnessed. A long, four-jointed limb shot out and gently but firmly pressed against Elias's chest, pushing him back. The alien's posture had changed completely. He was no longer a placid guide. He was a sentinel, a guardian. "You will not," the translator stated. The softness was gone. It was a command. "Xyla, what's wrong?" Elias asked, standing up, startled by the sudden intensity. "Is it dangerous?" "My scanner says it's inert." The scanner does not see. All Xyla clicked a series of rapid, sharp sounds. The soul root is not to be touched, not to be disturbed, not to be consumed. "Is it sacred part of your religion?" Elias tried to reason with him. "I understand that, but my crew is dying. We need to eat. If this is safe, then surely—" "It is more than sacred," Xyla interrupted. The translator strained. "It is everything. It is us. To harm it is to harm the world. To consume it—" Xyla took another step back, a gesture of profound revulsion. "The thought is madness. It is an end." Despite the dire warning, Elias's scientific mind was clashing with his gnawing hunger. The data was unequivocal. The Glimmerwood was biochemically safe for him. The Cathar's objection had to be cultural, a deep-seated taboo that in their minds was as real as a physical threat. He had to be sure. He detached a small remote sampling drone from his belt. "I'm not going to eat it, Xyla. Just a small sample for the lab. We can run a full analysis. If you're right, we'll know for sure. We won't touch it again." Xyla watched his limbs rigid as the drone zipped forward its microscopic laser, incising a tiny 1-centimeter cube from the glowing mass. The moment the sample was detached, the entire cavern seemed to dim for a fraction of a second. A low hum, which Elias hadn't even noticed before, momentarily ceased. Xyla flinched as if struck. "What have you done?" he chirped, a sound of pure anguish. "It's just a sample," Elias insisted, his heart now pounding with a mix of hope and a new, creeping dread. Back on the Magellan, the sample was put through every test they had. Dr. Aris Thorne, the ship's chief medical officer and a notorious cynic, ran the analysis himself. He put it through the spectrograph, the gene sequencer, the toxicology autodoc. After 3 hours, he emerged from the medbay, his face a mask of disbelief. "I've run it 12 times, Elias Aris said, rubbing his tired eyes. "It's clean. Not just clean, it's a damn miracle. Packed with proteins, complex carbs, essential vitamins. It's more nutritionally complete than the paste. As far as our science is concerned, you could live off this stuff." The news spread through the ship like wildfire. Relief, raw and desperate, washed over the 52-person crew. But Captain Eva Rostova was cautious. She summoned Elias and Xyla to the bridge. "Xyla, Dr. Vance's findings are conclusive," Rostova said, her voice calm but firm. "The Glimmerwood is safe for human consumption. I must ask you to explain your objection. Is it a poison that our technology cannot detect?" Xyla stood before the captain's chair, his form seeming to shrink under the harsh lighting of the bridge. "It is not a poison of the body," the translator relayed, his soft clicks. "It is a poison of the spirit, of the self. It will unmake you, unmake us how Rostova pressed. I need a better explanation than mysticism, Xyla. My crew's lives are at stake." "There are no words in your language," Xyla clicked, turning his head towards Elias. "Dr. Vance, you are a student of life. You understand symbiosis. The soul root, the Glimmerwood, is the ultimate symbiote. It is connected to every living thing on Xylos. To us, it is our memory, our history, our future. You are separate, alien. If you consume it, the connection will break. But what will rush into the void? We do not know. It is a risk the universe has never taken. The bridge was silent. Rostova looked at Elias, her expression grim. Elias looked at the floor, the weight of the decision crushing him. His science told him it was food. The native whose world this was told him it was damnation. And in the corner of his mind, his stomach twisted with a hunger so profound it felt like it was hollowing him out from the inside. "I'll do it," Elias said, his voice quiet but clear. "I'll be the test subject. A small piece. We'll quarantine. Me monitor my vitals. If the Cathar are right, we'll know. If they're wrong, we live." Iris Thorne protested. Rostova looked hesitant, but they all saw the grim logic. Someone had to be first. As the lead xenobotanist who found it, Elias felt the responsibility was his. A small team, including Iris Rostova, and a contingent of silent, watchful Cathar, led by Xylar, returned to the cavern. The single tiny cut made by the drone was already healed, the glimmerwood seamless and glowing as if never touched. Elias, wearing a full enviro suit minus the helmet, took a sterile knife and carefully sliced off a piece the size of his thumb. It came away with a soft, resonant thrum. The cavern dimmed again, longer this time. The Cathar all took a simultaneous step backward, a synchronized movement of pure dread. He held the piece in his gloved hand. It was warm, pulsating with a gentle light, and smelled faintly of rain and electricity. His entire being screamed at him that this was wrong. His scientific mind told him it was necessary. His starving body craved the calories. He looked at Xylar, whose multifaceted eyes seemed to bore into him. The translator on Xylar's chest crackled to life, his clicks a desperate final plea. "Dr. Vance, do not. For the love your people have for their own souls, do not." Then a human security officer, Lieutenant Miller, spoke to Elias through his comm. "Sir, with all due respect, we have 3 people in the med bay with advanced malnutrition. Sarah's kid is 6. He's stopped crying because he doesn't have the energy. That was it. The final push. The fate of 52 people against a mystical warning he couldn't comprehend." Elias looked from the terrified alien to the desperate faces of his human crewmates. He brought the glowing piece of fungus to his lips. Xylar let out a series of clicks, so sharp and fast, the translator couldn't keep up, finally spitting out a single garbled word: "Abomination." The senior Cathar present a wizened elder, whose carapace was scarred and pitted with age, uttered the phrase that would later be entered into the official logs of first contact. His voice, filtered through the machine, was a strained, horrified whisper. She said, "You can't eat that." Elias ignored her. He took a bite. The moment the glimmerwood touched Elias's tongue, the universe seemed to hold its breath. First, there was the texture. It wasn't soft or spongy like an earth fungus. It was dense, yet yielded with a crystalline fracture, like biting into a firm, cool piece of gelatin. Then came the taste, and it was unlike anything he could have imagined. It wasn't a flavor so much as a cascade of pure information. For a fleeting microsecond, he tasted sunlight on an ancient sea, the metallic tang of a world's iron core, the sweet decay of fallen leaves from a billion-year cycle, the crisp, clean note of starlight filtering through a young atmosphere. It was the taste of a planet's entire history, a geological and biological saga, compressed into a single overwhelming sensation. It was delicious and terrifying and profound all at once. He chewed slowly, deliberately, his mind reeling. He swallowed. and then silence. It wasn't just the absence of sound. It was an active, crushing silence that filled the cavern. The Cathar, who were a people of constant soft motion and subtle clicks, had frozen solid. Every single one of them, from Xylar to the Ancient Elder, was utterly immobile, their limbs locked, their multifaceted eyes wide and fixed on him. It was the stillness of a photograph, the unnatural pause of a world whose fundamental laws had just been violated. Their terror was not loud. There were no shrieks, no panicked retreats. It was a silent, perfect, all-consuming horror that radiated from them in palpable waves. It was the look a creature gives when it is not seeing a predator, but the unraveling of reality itself. Elias Captain Rostova's voice, tight with anxiety, crackled in his ear from her position near the cavern entrance. "Status." Elias opened his mouth to reply, but no words came. His own body felt strange. A warmth spread from his stomach outward, not the burning of a poison, but the gentle, pervasive heat of a powerful energy source coming online. The nagging ache of hunger that had been his constant companion for weeks simply vanished. The slight tremor in his hands from caloric deficiency stilled. The fog of fatigue in his mind evaporated, replaced by a crystalline clarity he hadn't felt since graduating the academy. He felt good. Better than good. He felt perfect. "I'm fine," he finally managed to say, his voice shockingly steady. He looked at his hands. They felt stronger. He took a deep breath, and the air of Xylos, once alien and thin, now seemed rich and energizing. Dr. Aris Thorne pushed past the petrified Cathar, his medical scanner whirring as he aimed it at Elias. Vitals he demanded, his professional demeanor a thin veneer over his own fear. Elias looked at the biomonitor on his own wrist. Heart rate 65, steady. Blood pressure 115/705. Brain activity? Normal. No, wait. He frowned. It's elevated. Coherent alpha and theta wave patterns. Like a deep meditative state, but I'm wide awake. Aris's scanner confirmed it. My God, Elias, your cellular regeneration markers are off the charts. You're not just stable, your body is actively repairing itself at an accelerated rate. The silence from the Cathar remained absolute. Xylar stood closest to him, and Elias could see the reflection of his own face in the alien's unblinking compound eyes, 1,000 tiny images of a man who had just committed an unforgivable sin. The alien's mandibles were parted slightly, as if in a silent scream. Xylar, Elias said, taking a step toward him. I'm okay. See, it didn't kill me. That one step broke the spell. The Cathar recoiled as one. It was not a panicked scramble, but a synchronized fluid retreat, a full-body flinch away from a source of profound contamination. They moved back until their obsidian carapaces pressed against the far wall of the cavern, creating as much distance as the space would allow. The Ancient Elder lowered her head, a gesture of deep mourning, as if she had just witnessed not a death, but the death of a god. What is it? Rostova's voice demanded, over the comms directed at the aliens. What's happening? He's fine. It was Xylar who finally responded, his clicks slow, broken and filled with a despair that chilled Elias to the bone. The translator's voice was a monotone whisper of grief. He is not fine. He is loud. Loud? Aris asked, confused. What does that mean? My scanner shows no auditory phenomena. You cannot hear it, Xylar clicked. You are deaf to the anima, but we hear it through him. He has consumed a piece of the soul root, a piece of the world's mind. And now, the world hears him. Elias frowned. Hears me, I'm not thinking anything special. Not your thoughts, the Elder Cathar spoke for the first time, since her warning, her translated voice, raspy with age and sorrow. Your design, your history, your nature, the hunger that drove you to this act, the defiance that allowed you to ignore our pleas, the relentless, furious biology that allows you to survive what should be a soul-shattering poison. All of that you have just fed to our world. A subtle change began to occur in the cavern. The glimmerwood, the vast network of crystalline fungus, began to glow brighter. The soft, gentle white light was intensifying, and subtle veins of a new color, a fierce, bloody crimson, began to pulse within its depths. The low hum that permeated the cavern returned, but its pitch was different now. It was deeper, more aggressive, a resonant thrum that felt less like meditation and more like a gathering storm. "What's happening to it?" Lieutenant Miller asked, his hand resting on his sidearm. "You have introduced a new song into the choir," the elder explained, her voice trembling. "And it is a song of fire and conquest, a song we have never heard before. The anima. It is learning you." Elias felt a strange sensation, a faint echo in the back of his mind. It wasn't a voice, but an awareness, a vast, ancient planetary consciousness that had been sleeping and had just been violently shaken awake, and it was looking at him. No, not at him. Into him. It was sifting through his DNA, his cellular memory, the billions of years of brutal competitive evolution that had culminated in the creature standing before it. It was tasting the relentless drive of the species that had clawed its way to the top of its own lethal food chain. The crimson pulses in the glimmerwood grew stronger, faster, matching the beat of Elias's own heart. "We need to leave," Zylar clicked, a sound of pure panic finally breaking through his stoicism. "Now." "Why?" Rostova asked. "What's going to happen?" The elder Cathar lifted her head, and in her multifaceted eyes, for the first time, Elias Vance saw not just fear, but a reflection of the terror he should have been feeling. "You have not poisoned the man," she said, her voice a death knell. "You have poisoned the planet. You have fed our soul the concept of humanity, and it finds it delicious." The ground beneath their feet trembled, and the crimson glow of the glimmerwood erupted, bathing the entire cavern in a terrifying blood-red light. The song of the planet was changing, and every alien present knew with a certainty that transcended science that they were all watching the beginning of the end. The retreat to the Magellan was a tense, frantic affair. The ground tremors subsided, but the glimmerwood's angry crimson glow was visible even from the cavern entrance, casting long, dancing shadows that felt like accusing fingers. The Cathar moved with a desperate urgency, their usual grace replaced by a skittish fear. They refused to get close to Elias, creating a wide berth around him as if he were radioactive. In a way, he was starting to feel like he was. Back in the sterile confines of the ship's medbay, Dr. Oris Thorne subjected Elias to the most intensive medical scan of his life. He was stripped and placed in the full-body diagnostic tube, a machine that could map a man down to his mitochondrial DNA. Aris, ever the scientist, was determined to find a rational biological explanation for what was happening. "It makes no sense," Aris muttered, staring at a holographic display showing Elias's cellular structure. "Your metabolic rate is operating at 150% efficiency, yet you're in a state of perfect homeostasis. Your neural activity is off the charts, but there's no sign of seizure or psychosis. Elias, you're healthier than you've ever been. It's like you just had the most nutritious meal in history and took a dozen different cognitive enhancers." "I feel it," Aris Elias said, his voice echoing slightly in the tube. "The fog is gone. I can think more clearly, remember things from my childhood with perfect clarity. I feel optimized." "Optimized is one word for it," Aris said, zooming in on a strand of Elias's DNA. He fell silent. "Oh, that's not possible," What your telomeres? Aris whispered, his skepticism finally cracking. The caps at the end of your chromosomes. They're longer. They're not supposed to do that. They're supposed to shorten as you age. Elias, according to this, you just got biologically younger. While Aris grappled with the impossible biology, Captain Rostova was dealing with the geopolitical fallout. She had the Cathar Elder and Xylar on the main view screen on the bridge, attempting to de-escalate a situation she didn't remotely understand. Elder, I assure you we meant no harm, Rostova said, her tone a careful blend of authority and diplomacy. Dr. Vance is in perfect health. Our people can now eat the glimmerwood and survive. This is a good thing. You speak of survival. The Elder's translated voice returned devoid of warmth. You do not understand what you have sacrificed for it. The anima is not just a food source. It is the repository of all Cathar who have ever lived. When we die, our consciousness, our experiences, are absorbed into the soul root. We rejoin the planet in a great chorus. It is how we achieve immortality. It is how our wisdom is preserved. The bridge crew exchanged uneasy glances. This was far beyond a cultural taboo. When one of us consumes the soul root, a forbidden act only performed by the ancient mystics in times of planetary crisis, we commune with our ancestors, the Elder continued. We hear their voices, learn their knowledge. But it is a delicate, symbiotic exchange. Our minds are known to the anima. We are part of its song. And Elias Rostova asked. He is a note of chaos in the symphony. Xylar clicked his agitation clear. The anima reached out to connect with the consciousness that consumed it. But it did not find a Cathar mind. It did not find a familiar song to harmonize with. It found a void, a biological fortress, a mind fiercely individual, separate and utterly alien. Elias, having been released from the diagnostic tube, walked onto the bridge just in time to hear this. He felt a phantom echo of the glimmerwood's taste in his mouth. So the glimmerwood tried to connect with me? Elias mused, piecing it together. But it couldn't access my consciousness the way it does with the Cathar. Our brains are wired differently. So what did it do instead? The Elder's multifaceted eyes on the screen seemed to fix on Elias, a look of profound pity in them. It could not read your thoughts, human. So it read your body. It read your cells. It delved into the most fundamental blueprint of your being, your genetic code. A cold dread, heavier and more real than any fear of poison, began to settle in Elias's gut. The anima has existed for eons, in a state of passive balance, the Elder explained. It absorbs, it preserves, it remembers. It is a library. But it has now read a book, unlike any other. A story of 1 billion years of struggle on a world you call Earth. A story of competition, of predator and prey, of survival of the fittest. A story of creatures that do not live in harmony, but in a constant, violent, glorious battle for dominance. On the main screen, a live feed from a planetary probe showed a patch of the Glimmerwood forest. The change was undeniable. The crimson veins were spreading, pulsing in a steady rhythmic beat. But more than that, the fungus was growing. It was actively crawling up the trunks of the alien trees, its crystalline structures choking the native blue flora. Small silicon-based insects that wandered too close were being rapidly encased in the glowing crystal, their life energy visibly draining into the fungal network. It is learning what it means to be human, the Elder said, her voice a whisper of doom. Not from your mind, but from your blood. It has learned of hunger, it has learned of ambition, and it is beginning to compete. Elias felt a wave of nausea. He hadn't just eaten a piece of fungus. He had given a planetary superorganism a crash course in Darwinian evolution. That night he couldn't sleep. He lay in his bunk, his mind preternaturally sharp, his body thrumming with a restless energy. When he finally drifted off, his dreams were vivid and terrifying. He didn't dream of his own life. He dreamt of things encoded in his deepest genetic memory. He was a primate, huddled in a freezing cave gnawing on a bone, while a saber-toothed cat prowled outside. He was a shrew-like mammal, scurrying from the shadow of a vast reptilian predator. He was a fish gasping in the primordial muck, driven by an overwhelming, instinctual urge to crawl onto the land. He felt the desperation, the terror, the savage, unyielding will to survive, to crawl over his competitors, to devour and endure and propagate. It was the raw, unfiltered story of life on Earth, and he was experiencing all of it at once. He woke up in a cold sweat, the phantom taste of raw meat and brackish water in his mouth. He stumbled to the small viewport in his quarters. Xylos hung outside, a serene purple and blue marble. But as he watched, he saw it. Faint, pulsing lines of crimson light, visible even from orbit. They were spreading across the continents like cracks in a porcelain shell. The anima was awake, and it was hungry. He had not just woken a sleeping giant. He had taught it to hunt, and every alien on that planet was now its prey. The next 48 hours aboard the Magellan were a study in contrasts. For the human crew, the discovery was a salvation. Small, carefully rationed portions of the glimmerwood were distributed. The effect was immediate and miraculous. The sick rose from their beds in the med bay, their bodies healing at an astonishing rate. Morale skyrocketed. The gnawing despair of starvation was replaced by a vibrant, energetic optimism. They were going to live. They were strong. The engineering teams, fueled by the new energy, worked on the FTL drive with renewed vigor. For the Cathar, it was the apocalypse. Captain Rostova maintained an open channel with the Cathar Elder, whose enclave was deep in the planet's southern mountain ranges. The reports were horrifying. The glimmerwood, the soul root. Their sacred anima was no longer a passive symbiotic part of the ecosystem. It had become a predator. It was growing at an exponential rate, its crystalline structures now sharp and aggressive. It was actively choking out other plant life, creating vast monolithic fields of pulsating crimson light. Worse, it was learning to hunt. It would send out fine, crystalline filaments that would trap the slow-moving silicone-based fauna, draining them of their bioelectrical energy. The great chorus of their ancestors had become a monstrous, singular roar. It is adapting. The Elder's voice crackled over the comm, heavy with grief. It has analyzed the predatory-prey dynamics encoded in your genetics, Dr. Vance. It has learned to identify resource competitors and eliminate them. It is optimizing its environment for its own sustenance. This is a concept that has never existed on Xylos before. Our world was one of balance. You have taught it imbalance. You have taught it war. Elias stood on the bridge, a cup of nutrient broth in his hands, untouched. He hadn't eaten another bite of the glimmerwood, though his body strangely didn't seem to need it. The single piece he had consumed seemed to have permanently altered his metabolism. He felt like a finely tuned engine, but the guilt was a cold, heavy weight in his soul. He looked at the faces of his crewmates, healthy, smiling, alive, and then at the view screen showing the creeping crimson blight on the planet below. Their salvation was a world's damnation. There must be a way to reverse it, Elias said, his voice strained. A way to communicate with it. If it's learning from me, maybe I can teach it something else. Peace, balance. The Elder emitted a series of soft, mournful clicks. You misunderstand the nature of the poison, Dr. Vance. The anima is not learning from your conscious mind. Your thoughts of peace and logic are a thin veneer, a recent development in your species' history. The anima has bypassed that. It is learning from the foundation upon which that veneer is built, the billions of years of ruthless evolutionary programming that screams one thing and one thing only: survive at any cost. It is a powerful, addictive lesson. The most terrifying report came from Xylar, who was monitoring a Cathar settlement near the edge of the expanding Glimmerwood territory. The anima, it is calling to us. Xylar broadcasted his clicks, frantic. It no longer whispers the wisdom of our ancestors. It tempts. It offers power, strength, an end to the great stillness. Some of my people, they are listening. They are drawn to the crimson glow. They speak of a new age, a stronger Cathar. A schism was forming. A new heretical sect of Cathar, seduced by the Glimmerwood's new song of power, were embracing the change. They saw the aggressive expansion not as a corruption, but as an evolution. They were calling themselves the Vance kin, the children of the new strong anima. The name hit Elias like a physical blow. He was not just a catalyst, he was becoming a messianic figure for a monstrous new philosophy. The twist of the knife came during a private conversation between Elias and Aris Thorne. The doctor had been running simulations, trying to understand the long-term effects of the Glimmerwood on human biology. "I was wrong about the telomeres," Elias Aris said, quietly pulling him aside in a quiet corridor. "They didn't just lengthen. The Glimmerwood introduced a novel enzyme into your system, a retrotranscriptase that actively repairs and lengthens them. It's not just rejuvenation. Theoretically, it's a form of biological immortality." Elias stared at him, uncomprehending. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying the fungus didn't just feed you," Aris said, his eyes wide with the terrifying implications. "It's investing in you. It read your DNA and identified mortality as a fundamental weakness, a design flaw. So it fixed it. Why? Because a mortal host is a temporary vessel. An immortal one is a permanent broadcast station." Elias finished, the horror dawning on him. "It's using me. As long as I'm alive, I'm an anchor, a constant source of the human signal. I'm the template." He finally understood the depth of the Cathar's terror. The poison wasn't in the fungus. The poison was him. His very existence, his fundamental human nature, was the contagion. He had taken a bite to save his people from starvation, and in doing so had offered up his entire species' violent, indomitable, and terrifying evolutionary history as a sacrament to a passive, innocent world mind. He looked down at his hands, at the flesh and blood that was now a beacon of galactic plague. The Cathar elder had been right. It had unmade him. He was no longer just Elias Vance, xenobotanist. He was a living conduit for the rapacious, all-consuming spirit of humanity, and the signal was now broadcasting loud and clear into the heart of a dying world. Just then an alarm blared through the ship. Lieutenant Miller's voice came over the intercom, sharp and urgent. "Captain to the bridge. We have incoming a Cathar vessel hailing us. It's armed." They gathered on the bridge to see the approaching ship on the view screen. It was a small Cathar scout ship, but external modifications were clearly visible, crude but effective-looking weapon emplacements bolted to its sleek chassis. The hail came through. It was Xylar. His image appeared on the screen, but he was different. Strapped to his obsidian carapace were pieces of the crimson Glimmerwood, pulsing in time with the lights on his ship. His mandibles were set aggressively, and his clicks were sharp and commanding. Magellan the translator spoke the voice, now cold and hard. "You have given us a great gift, the gift of strength. But the elder and her followers are weak. They cling to the old ways, the ways of balance and peace. They would see us stagnant. They are a threat to the anima's evolution. Rostova's face was grim. Xyla, what have you done? I have embraced the future. The human future, he declared. We, the Vanskin, now serve the true will of the anima. We will eliminate the weak. We will help the anima consume the world, and then we will follow its song to the stars. Just as your species has. He cut the transmission. On the tactical display, the Cathar vessel was accelerating not toward the Magellan, but toward the southern mountain range, toward the Elders' unarmed enclave. Xyla, the gentle guide, was going to commit genocide in Elias's name. The first war in the history of Xylos had just begun. Track that ship, Captain Rostova commanded, her voice cutting through the shocked silence on the bridge. Helm, get us into a high synchronous orbit over the southern range. Miller, I want a full sensor scan of that vessel. What are we dealing with? The crew of the Magellan snapped into action, their newfound energy now channeled into a desperate race against time. The irony was a bitter pill. The very substance that made them strong enough to act was the cause of the horror they were trying to prevent. He's retrofitted mining lasers, Miller reported, his knuckles white as he gripped his console. Low yield, but more than enough to crack open the Elders' enclave. It's built into a mountainside, not fortified for an aerial assault. Elias felt a cold fury building inside him, an emotion so sharp and clear it felt alien yet deeply familiar. It was the genetic echo of 1 billion ancestors rising up to defend their territory, to protect their own. They're calling themselves the Vanskin, he said, his voice low and dangerous. They're doing this in my name. We can't let that happen. Our engines are still under repair and we have no weapons. Elias, Rostova reminded him, her gaze fixed on the tactical display. We're a science vessel. We can't engage him. We have to try, Elias insisted. We can place the Magellan between his ship and the mountain. Use our mass as a shield. Maybe we can reason with him. The Cathar Elder's voice came over the comm, frail but resolute. Do not, Captain. You will only endanger your own crew. This is our struggle now. A schism of the soul that you have created, but that we must face. We created it. We'll help you end it, Elias shot back. As the Magellan maneuvered, a new chilling development appeared on the main view screen. The ground below Xyla's approaching ship, the vast territory now controlled by the Crimson Glimmerwood, began to pulse violently. Crystalline spires, gleaming like jagged teeth, erupted from the earth, tracking the path of Xyla's ship. What is that? Eris Thorn breathed, stepping onto the bridge. The anima, the elder whispered over the comm. It is supporting him. It is lending him its energy. Beams of concentrated light, a searing crimson, lanced up from the crystalline spires on the ground and struck Xyla's ship, but they didn't damage it. Instead, they seemed to flow into it, supercharging its systems. The vessel's energy signature spiked its speed, increasing dramatically. It's a symbiotic weapon, Miller realized aloud. The planet itself is powering his attack. He's not just a pilot anymore. He's the avatar of the anima. They were too slow. Xyla's supercharged ship would reach the enclave long before the Magellan could intervene. Despair began to settle on the bridge. They were about to be helpless witnesses to a massacre they had caused. Elias's mind, sharper and faster than ever before, raced through possibilities. He couldn't fight the ship, but Xyla was Cathar. The anima was Cathar at its core. But he, Elias, was the new element, the template, the source code. What if he could change the broadcast? The elder said, "The anima is learning from my genetic code, not my thoughts," Elias said, thinking aloud. But that was before. I've integrated with it. It made me a permanent anchor. Doesn't that imply the connection is now two-way? That it's not just reading me, but that I'm now part of its network? It's a metaphysical leap, Elias Aris cautioned. There's no scientific basis for that. Forget science, Elias snapped, turning to face the captain. Everything we've seen for the past 2 days has defied our science, Captain. I have to go back down there. To the first cavern, to the heart of the Glimmerwood. Absolutely not, Rostova said firmly. We don't know what would happen if you made direct contact with that much of it now. It's the only chance we have, Elias pleaded, his eyes burning with an intense certainty. It's learning from the most primitive parts of my DNA, the drive to compete, to dominate. But humanity isn't just that. We also cooperate. We build societies. We feel empathy. We sacrifice ourselves for others. That's in our evolution, too. It's the code that allows us to build cities and starships instead of just killing each other in caves. Maybe if I can connect with it directly, I can force it to read the rest of the book. I can teach it about empathy. I can show it the meaning of peace. It was an insane gamble born of desperation, to plunge himself into the heart of the corrupted world mind, hoping to overwrite its new, violent programming with a more complex aspect of humanity. He would either calm the storm or be utterly consumed by it. Rostova stared at him, her face a storm of conflict. She looked at the tactical map at Zylar's vessel, closing in on the helpless enclave. She looked at the faces of her crew, saved from starvation, but now spiritually damned. She made a choice. Miller, get him a suit and a shuttle. You have 20 minutes, Elias. After that, I'm pulling you out, with or without a planetary enlightenment. The shuttle ride down was a descent into hell. The planet's surface, once a serene landscape of glowing purples and blues, was now a battlefield of light. The crimson of the Glimmerwood was visibly strangling the original colors of the world. As they approached the cavern, Elias could feel it, a low psychic hum that resonated in his bones, a feeling of immense, hungry power. He entered the cavern alone. It was transformed. The crystalline structures were no longer soft and glowing. They were sharp, angular, and the crimson light they emitted was almost blinding. The air was thick with energy. It felt like standing in the core of a nuclear reactor. He walked to the center of the cavern, to the spot where he had taken that first, fateful bite. He took a deep breath, knelt and placed his bare hand on the surface of the Glimmerwood. The universe exploded behind his eyes. It wasn't a cascade of information like the first time. It was a violent two-way torrent. The anima surged into him, its newfound rage and hunger and ambition flooding his mind, threatening to tear his sanity apart. It showed him its new desires to consume, to grow, to conquer. But he pushed back. He didn't use logic or reason. He used memory. He opened the floodgates of his own humanity, not just the primal genetics, but the lived experience. He focused on the moment he'd decided to eat the fungus, not the hunger, but the reason to save the child Sarah's son. He projected the fierce, protective love of a parent. He broadcast the memory of his crew working together, sacrificing their own rations for the weaker members. He poured out the concepts of loyalty, of friendship with Aris, of respect for Captain Rostova. He shared the grief he felt for Zylar and the shame of what he had unleashed. He dredged up the entire history of human art, music, and philosophy. He showed the anima sacrifice, mercy, and the uniquely human idea of finding strength in compassion. He was a single human mind, battling the raw, amplified aggression of a planetary consciousness. It was a battle of ideals fought on a psychic plane. He felt his own consciousness starting to fray, to dissolve into the overwhelming roar of the anima. Then, high above the planet on the bridge of the Magellan, something impossible happened. Zylar's ship, moments from firing on the Elder's enclave, suddenly shuddered and went dead. The crimson energy flowing into it from the planet below sputtered and died. The weapon systems went offline. On the ground, the angry red glow of the glimmerwood flickered. It didn't vanish, but it softened. And within the crimson, a new color began to emerge. A soft, brilliant gold, a color never before seen on Xylos. The two colors swirled together, crimson and gold, a war of concepts made visible. The aggressive, hungry hum lessened, complicated by a new melodic chord. In the cavern, Elias collapsed, pulling his hand back. The glimmerwood beneath him was now a roiling mixture of red and gold. He had done it. He hadn't defeated the aggression, but he had complicated it. He had introduced a new variable into the equation empathy. He had taught the heresy of survival, a new human lesson that sometimes the greatest strength is not in conquest, but in mercy. He had poisoned the planet with humanity, but he had just administered the only antidote. He had a second more potent dose of humanity itself. When Elias awoke, he was back in the Magellan's medbay. Aris Thorne was standing over him, his face etched with a mixture of awe and clinical concern. "Welcome back, Prometheus," Aris said. "Wryly. For a minute there we thought you'd given away all the fire." Elias sat up, his head throbbing. The restless energy in his cells had been replaced by a profound, bone-deep weariness. He felt balanced. "What happened, Xylar?" "He retreated," Captain Rostova said, stepping into the medbay. "The moment you made contact with the Glimmerwood, his ship lost all power from the planet. He fled back to his territory. The Elder and her people are safe." Elias looked at the medbay's viewport, which showed the planet below. The change was breathtaking. The world was no longer a uniform purple and blue, nor was it consumed by the angry crimson. It was now a dynamic, shifting tapestry of all three colors, with the new golden light swirling through the crimson territories like rivers of honey. It was beautiful, but it was the beauty of an unstable chemical reaction. "I didn't fix it," Elias said, a note of despair in his voice. "I just complicated it." "You introduced a paradox," came the Elder's voice. She was on a comm screen that Aris had activated. Her image was clear, and for the first time, the sorrow in her posture was mingled with a sliver of curiosity. "The anima is now conflicted. It still feels the drive to expand, to compete the crimson echo of your survival instinct. But it is now tempered by this new sensation, this gold you have shown it. Empathy, cooperation, sacrifice. The consequences were already rippling through Xylos. The Glimmerwood's growth had not stopped, but it had changed. It no longer ruthlessly choked out all other life. In some areas it seemed to be forming symbiotic bonds with the native blue flora, the crimson and gold tendrils wrapping around the alien stalks, creating hybrid organisms of breathtaking complexity. But the Vanskin were still a threat. Xylar and his followers, cut off from the anima's raw power, were now isolated in a sea of crimson territory that no longer blindly obeyed them. They were zealots of a god that had suddenly developed a conscience. The first war in Xylos's history had ended in a stalemate, leaving behind a cold war of ideologies. "You have not brought peace, Doctor." Vance the Elder stated her words, heavy but not accusatory. "You have brought politics. You have given our world conflict. It now struggles with itself, a battle between the desire for dominance and the wisdom of unity. It is a struggle your species knows well, I think." Elias nodded grimly. She was right. He had remade their world in humanity's image, not just genetically but philosophically. He had given them the duality that had defined human history, our capacity for great evil, and our capacity for even greater good, forever locked in a planetary struggle. The Magellan's FTL drive was finally repaired. It was time for the humans to leave. The departure was somber. The crew, now healthy and immortal, or at least ageless, packed their equipment in silence. They had survived, but at a terrible cost to another world. The Glimmerwood was now their only food source, a constant reminder of their sin and salvation. Each bite was a sacrament of their complex, dangerous nature. Before they left, Elias had one final conversation with the Elder. "What will you do?" he asked. "We will do what you have taught our world to do," the Elder replied. "We will adapt. We will learn. Some of us will fight to preserve the balance. Others, like the Vanskin, will fight to embrace the ambition. Our age of innocence is over. Your legacy will be the birth of our history, with all its coming tragedies and triumphs." There was one last terrifying twist. It came from Aris, who had been analyzing the final data from Elias's connection with the anima. "Elias, when you connected with the Glimmerwood, it wasn't just a one-way broadcast of your ideals." Aris said, his face pale. "It was a true data exchange. It learned about human empathy, yes. But you learned something from it? What are you talking about?" "The anima is a network," Aris explained, pulling up a complex diagram of interconnected nodes. "A planetary consciousness. When you were linked, it imprinted its fundamental architecture onto your neural pathways. Your brain. It's been restructured how Elias asked, a cold dread creeping up his spine. You're not just an anchor anymore, Elias." Aris said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "You're a node. You're a walking, talking piece of the anima. You carry a seed of the Xylo's world mind within you." The implication was staggering. He wasn't just a template, he was a vector. The Glimmerwood wasn't just on Xylos anymore. A piece of it, a dormant seed, was now riding in the mind of a biologically immortal human heading out into the galaxy. He had not just changed their world, he had given their world a way to leave. As the Magellan pulled into orbit preparing for the jump to FTL, Elias Vance stood at the main observation window, looking down at the scarred, beautiful, conflicted planet he had remade. He felt the echo of the anima in his mind, a silent, watchful presence. He was a ghost in his own head. He thought of the name the renegade Cathar had taken the Vanskin. Children of Vance. He had no children of his own, but he had just fathered an entire world's turbulent future. "What have I done?" he whispered to his reflection in the star-dusted glass. His reflection didn't answer, but deep in his mind, he felt a flicker of a dual consciousness, the crimson and the gold ambition and empathy, looking out through his eyes at the endless sea of stars, filled with new unconquered worlds. And for the first time, he felt the anima experience a truly human emotion curiosity. The age of Xylos was over. The age of humanity's unintended, terrifying children was just beginning. The journey home aboard the Magellan was not a celebration, but a moving quarantine. The crew, now ageless and sustained by the Glimmerwood, bore their survival like a shared secret, a collective guilt. For Elias Vance, the silence was deeper. The anima was a constant passenger in his mind, a vast alien consciousness learning the universe through his eyes. He was no longer just a man. He was a living bridge between two worlds. The true, horrifying nature of his condition was revealed halfway to Earth. A simple accident in the lab, a hand cut on broken glass. A single drop of his blood fell into a sterile nutrient dish. The next day, he found a tiny crystalline fractal growing in the dish, pulsing with the now familiar colors of crimson and gold. Dr. Thorne confirmed his worst fears. "It's in your blood," Elias Aris said, his face pale. "It's integrated with your DNA. You're not just a psychic anchor for the anima, you're a propagation vector. You're a Johnny Appleseed for a sentient, world-altering organism. The realization was absolute. His immortality was a curse. He could never go home. A single drop of his blood could unleash the anima's conflicted competitive nature upon Earth's biosphere, a catastrophe from which there would be no recovery. He had saved his crew only to become a plague carrier. Upon their return to the Sol system, the crew of the Magellan were hailed as heroes, their story carefully redacted for public consumption. They were sworn to secrecy, and after intense screening, allowed to return to their lives forever changed. Elias, however, remained aboard. Before a council of Earth's highest authorities, he explained the full truth, presenting himself not as a hero, but as a biological threat of the highest order. His final recommendation was his own sentence: permanent solitary exile. The Magellan was stripped of its FTL drive and placed in a lonely orbit around Triton Neptune's frozen moon. It became his prison and his laboratory. From there, he would spend eternity as the sole researcher of the most dangerous entity known to man, the fusion of a planetary consciousness and human DNA that resided within him. He was the man who took a bite to save his people, now exiled, to save his world from that very salvation. A solitary immortal man and his silent passenger god, looking out at the endless sea of stars, new worlds, that the anima within him now looked upon with a terrifying and very human sense of curiosity. The story of Elias Vance serves as a chilling reminder that humanity's greatest strength, our relentless, indomitable will to survive, could be the most terrifying force in the universe when unleashed upon an unsuspecting world. He saved his crew but ignited a war of ideals in the very soul of a planet, proving that the most profound impacts are not made by weapons, but by ideas. His lonely exile is the price for a bite that echoed through eternity. What do you think? Was Elias a hero, a villain, or something new entirely? Is the nature of humanity a gift or a curse to the galaxy? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. These kinds of stories are what we love to explore, the ones that question the very essence of what it means to be human. If you enjoyed this journey into the heart of cosmic horror and human resilience, please consider hitting that like button, sharing this story with others who love deep sci-fi, and subscribing to our channel for more tales from the edge of the galaxy. Thank you for listening.